welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very empowering show coming right up with special guest Amy Newmark, and she's here today to share with us the new Chicken Soup for the Soul book, The Power of Yes. Now, Amy is a best-selling author, editor-in-chief, and publisher of the Chicken Soup for the Soul book series. Since 2008, she has published over 133 new books, most of them national bestsellers in the U.S. and Canada, more than doubling the number of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series titles in print today. She's also the author of Simply Happy, a crash course in Chicken Soup for the Soul advice and wisdom that's filled with easy-to-implement practical tips for having a better life. So let's welcome to the show Amy Newmark.
Well, thanks for having me on, Marianne. It's a wonderful showcase for us.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, my goodness, who wouldn't want to talk about your new book, The Power of Yes?
It has been creating quite a bit of buzz, I must say. I think this is a topic that everybody responds to, and everybody says, oh, yeah, I could use a little more of that in my life, because I think no matter how adventurous we are, we all sometimes need that reminder to be open to new things, even things we are afraid of or things that we think we might not like.
Well, and it's interesting. So when I think of the power of yes, it's so easy to think of you because you are this person that's such a dynamo in life. You kind of take the bull by the horns and run with it. I don't think there's a no in your vocabulary.
Except that we get something like 5,000 or 6,000 stories submitted for each book, and we only have space for 101 stories. So there is a lot of no going on. I always feel really bad about that. But, there's only so much room, and we really need to have a great variety of stories in each book. So we're publishing the cream of the crop, and it means that every story has a different message than every other story in the book. So that makes it a lot of fun.
Well, that part's got to be very difficult because I know you guys are so popular. I mean, this, of course, is the Chicken Soup of the Soul series. And so, everyone wants to collaborate with you and to be a part of just an extraordinary book that lifts so many people up. No wonder you're getting such a great influx of people sending in their stories.
So, we're talking at the right time because this is our 25th anniversary. And so we are actually starting our 26th year with this book, Chicken Soup for the Soul, The Power of Yes, which I think is a really fabulous way of starting our 26th year and starting our next quarter century in publishing all of these inspirational books, because The Power of Yes is so all-encompassing, and it really encapsulates the whole message of Chicken Soup for the Soul, right? That we always have room in our lives for more inspiration, for more adventure, for more embracing of change, for more positive thinking. So I'm very excited about this. This book seems to me to just pull together all of the themes that we've had in 25 years of Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Well, how exciting is that? Congratulations. My goodness. 25 years. What an accomplishment that is. And to bring it to where it is today, because the Chicken Soup of the Soul brand has really taken off.
It has, because we don't only have our books, and we're publishing almost one new book a month, all on different topics and many on new topics for us, but we also have a big entertainment business now. And so we have movies, we have television shows, we have a big online presence. We own something called A+. A+.com is a really fabulous positive journalism website. So we have so many different ways now that we're doing our storytelling. It started as storytelling in the pages of a book, but now it's storytelling in printed books, in e-books, in audio books, in podcasting, in television shows, in, online delivery of stories. So however people get their storytelling that inspires them and brightens their days, we are there on every size screen and also, in their ears and still on paper as well. So, yeah, I think we're probably the world's favorite storyteller. I can't think of anybody else who is as popular worldwide telling real stories, from real people.
Well, and my goodness, I mean, I'm a member of A+, so it's I didn't know that you guys own that, so how cool is that? Because I know when that was first launched, it was such a huge hit, and it just keeps growing as well. And of course, you guys would be involved in something that just brings such positive messages, positive journalism to the forefront. So I really applaud you for all the work that you're doing with that.
Yeah, A+ is really fun. We own it 75%. And 25% is owned by Ashton Kutcher. So we work with him a lot, and he's very passionate about positive journalism, which of course makes sense for somebody in the acting world to be very aware of the difference between positive journalism and negative journalism. And we don't really think there's any place for negative journalism.
I agree with you. I couldn't agree more. Well, and so to talk about your new book, The Power of Yes, you have it broken up in all these different chapters. And one of the chapters I really liked was Try New Things. And I think a lot of times people just get stuck. And I love this grouping of different stories that these women and men had written and collaborated.
Yeah, so this is something I am so passionate about, which is just making a policy of saying yes to new things. So I began the whole book with a story by Vicki Francis, who I had the pleasure of actually meeting a couple of months ago in New York City when we got a bunch of our contributors together. And when she was turning 50, she decided that she would make a policy of saying yes to just about everything. And what was cool about it was that she decided to do 365 new things, one a day. So sometimes it was, 11:45 p.m. and she was trying to find something and she'd say like, oh, I'll go do a Sudoku puzzle in the newspaper because I've never done that before. But after a while, she was finding things more easily. People were bringing her new things to try. And then friends and family members got involved also. And I find that most of our writers who report about this policy of trying new things end up dragging along with them family members and friends. And so lots of people end up getting, energized and empowered because we're all really proud of ourselves when we try new things. It's a really great way to brighten your days no matter what is happening in your life.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with you 100%. It's interesting when we branch out and try something that we've never experienced before, how it really opens our perspective to the world.
It really makes you a participant in the world. And you can start in such small ways, like you could go to a different grocery store than you normally go to. Because I bet if you think about it, you go to the same grocery store over and over because you know where everything is. So my husband and I make a policy of going to lots of different grocery stores. We just force ourselves to go to different ones where we don't know where anything is. And it does two things. It makes our brains work because we have to figure out where things are, but it also exposes us to new foods. And then we buy something new that we've never tried before. And that's such an easy, small way to start the process of that policy of saying yes to new things. And you can do it with technology as an example. That's a place where we all run the risk of falling behind and not really participating in the world. If you don't know how to use Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, or you don't know all the features on your cell phone, you don't have to learn everything, but learn one new feature. And you'll be proud of yourself, and you'll actually realize, oh, these features are kind of useful. These will actually help my life. So I love the idea of people starting small, and then over time you can do something big, like ride the roller coaster at the amusement park that you swore you would never ride, or watch a kind of movie that you thought you would hate. Your husband loves a certain kind of movie you never watch with him. Just try it one time. See if you can understand what it is that he loves about it. Or watch football this fall. Even if you don't think you like watching football, watch it and actually try to learn the rules and see if you can enjoy it. There's just so many different things that we can do to be more active participants in the world around us.
Well, and so I'm kind of going a step backwards, and please excuse me for this. But when you decide that you were going to get together the power of yes, and you had all these people come in, how did you decide on this theme for this book?
It's something that came from my own life, because when I turned 50, I decided that I needed to make sure that I kept doing new things and that I needed to keep stepping outside my comfort zone. And then I saw stories about this coming in from our writers, because, when you get thousands of stories submitted for each book, you're reading stories on so many subtopics. So even if somebody was giving us a story for a Christmas book or a book about mothers or a book about dogs or whatever, you would get a sub-theme, and you could see that people were actively trying new things and how much it was helping them. And so it seemed to me like this was a topic that people liked to write about. And usually if people like to write about a topic, it also means that people like to read about a topic. And so we actually did a call out for stories for a book called Chicken Soup for the Soul, Step Outside Your Comfort Zone. And that book got so many submissions that were terrific that we ended up making 2 books. So we made the Step Outside Your Comfort Zone Chicken Soup book, and that came out in the fall of 2017. And then we said, you know what, we're going to make a second book, and that's this Power of Yes book that's coming out now. And so we made 2 books, and the variety of experiences that people reported on was terrific. And it's not just about trying new things. It's about learning to embrace change. It's about reaching out and making connections with new people. It's about overcoming phobias and fears. And it's even about people completely reinventing themselves and basically starting over no matter what age they are and doing something completely new that really is, I guess, something where they can follow their passion, pursue their passion, and really be true to their real desires. So we have a variety of sub-themes in addition to this overall idea about trying new things.
Well, it's interesting. I turned 50 this year, and when I was looking at the book, it really, because, it's interesting. When we get to certain different places in our lives, a lot of times we'll kind of pause and kind of reflect on where our life is and where we'd like to see it go. And I felt that the Power of Yes really had a lot of the stories that were kind of touching me personally during this period of time. And I'm sure that a lot of people feel the same way, that they can draw from it something that'll either motivate them, maybe change their perspective, or change their heart.
Yeah, and there's nobody who doesn't benefit from embracing change and trying new things and facing their fears. No matter how adventurous a person is, that person still has certain things that he or she has not been doing and should really try to do. And it can be so simple. I mean, I gave you the grocery store example. We have a woman named Sarah Etkin-Baker, and you'll appreciate this because you work with so many writers. So she was a professional writer, but she was more, she was doing a lot of projects on this tiny little desk. And so this desk was so small that she had to scatter all her papers around her on the floor, around her chair. And then she and her husband moved into a larger home, and she got a whole room to be her study. And she still had the tiny little desk in there with the papers scattered around her on the floor. And her husband said, why don't we get you a bigger desk? You have room for it now. And she was afraid. She was afraid because somehow a bigger desk meant that she would be pursuing a bigger career, more writing competitions, just a bigger presence as a writer. And she kept saying no. And he kept saying to her, well, what are you afraid of? And she finally said yes and got the bigger desk. And she realized that the bigger desk was actually going to cause her to reach out and try to do bigger writing projects and more challenging contests and leave her comfort zone. And so she got the bigger desk, and her writing career expanded as a result. So even little things like that, if we think about our lives, we'll realize we're stuck in some way. And so I have myself really tried to battle that stuck in a rut thing, and I've done lots of things that scare me, actually, just to prove that I can do them and that I'm not getting old before my time.
I'm all for that. I'm all for doing something new and not getting stuck and, trying a new adventure. And I felt that the chapter you have that talks about embrace change really helped, at least look at things in a new way with that. And I loved, you had this story, I hope I get this right, On the Wings of Change. I think that was what it was called.
Oh, yeah. Which story number was that? I'm sure I know it, but I never remember the titles of the stories.
Oh, you know what? I'm sure with all the reading that you've been doing with the different stories out there, I think that one was number 14. And gosh,
okay, let me see that one.
Yeah, what a great one that was. I love that one. I felt it.
Oh, yeah, that's the one with the desk. Yes, exactly. I just did not remember that On the Wings of Change was the desk. But that's Sarah Eckenbaker's story, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can see how that really relates and how people feel like, gosh, if I do something big, like get a bigger desk, how it's actually making things bigger in the world for me. And I love how that came together.
The other thing that people do is they reinvent themselves, and so we had a number of stories about that, including from men. There were a lot of men who contributed stories to this book. Like one guy, Doug Sletton, he had an absolutely fine life. He was married, he owned his home, he had 3 kids, he was I think a middle school teacher, a high school teacher, he was also a coach. And everything was great, but secretly he had always wanted to be a lawyer. He had always loved watching television shows about lawyers and movies about lawyers and all the strategizing and everything. And he got into his late 20s, and he just kept thinking about how he really wanted to be a lawyer. And so he talked to his father, and he said, Dad, it would take me a year, to study for the LSATs and to apply to law school, and then 3 more years to actually go to law school. So I wouldn't be finished for 4 years, and I'd already be in my 30s. And his father, who was normally really conservative, said, well, how old would you be in 4 years if you didn't pursue your dream? So he said, well, you're right. I would still be the same age, but I wouldn't be a lawyer. So his wife went along with it, and Doug actually sold his house, moved into a really small place. They completely upended their whole lifestyle. They moved their children. He went to law school. It was just grueling and really difficult to do that, as a father. And anyway, he ended up practicing law for 25 years, and he was so happy that he had done it and so grateful for his family, which had supported him, in such a big change to their lives. So we do have a number of stories like that also where people are stuck in a rut of not really being in the life that they want to be in, and they decide to completely reinvent themselves and become that new person. And I think that's really thrilling also. And that's what's cool about having 101 stories in Chicken Soup for the Soul, The Power of Yes, from all these different people, because there's something that each of us is going to relate to.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. And, it's interesting. It's not just for women. There are a lot of men that contribute to Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Oh, yeah. We have lots of men, and we have lots of men who read the books. I always say to women, though, a man might not go and buy the book, but if you leave it in the bathroom, he'll read the book.
In the bathroom, on their desk, wherever, they're going to pick it up and read it, and get involved in the book, which is so true because, who knows where inspiration will come that help people to that next stage in life, just like you were explaining with this gentleman that decided to, pursue his career.
People get inspired in the strangest ways. We have a story in the book from Miriam Van Scott, and her inspiration came at a Bon Jovi concert. So she had just turned 40, and her husband took her to a Bon Jovi concert as a present. And it was their Have a Nice Day tour, and she was really looking forward to hearing her old favorites when she went to the concert. But they were on tour promoting their new album. And so she's there listening, and she realizes they're playing all this new music that she never heard before. And then she realizes, wow, I really like this new music. This is new and different. This is different from Bon Jovi's old sound. I really love the complexity of this music. And then she looked at John Bon Jovi and his fellow performers up on the stage, and she thought, we're all about the same age. And here they are doing things that are new and different, and they're still growing professionally and being creative, and they're trying new things. Why have I not been trying any new things? And so she bought their CD, and she spent the next month listening to the CD every single day. And the lyrics on the CD actually spoke to this whole thing about not stopping your growth and not, succumbing to middle age. And so she ended up deciding that she was going to reinvent herself as a writer. She had been a journalist and a nonfiction writer, and Bon Jovi inspired her to become a fiction writer, and now she's a very much published fiction writer, and it all came out of being inspired at that conference by these guys who were continuing to grow and change and not just falling back, on their old popular standbys.
Oh, my goodness. I love that. That is so awesome. It's amazing where people will get their inspiration, and this book is filled with it, The Power of Yes. Where when we look at some of the other titles, Believe in Yourself, we talked about Put Yourself Out There a little bit. When you look at all the stories that are in this book, you've listed a couple already, what's another one that really stands out for you?
So another thing that takes a lot of courage and can usually succeed but sometimes fail is putting yourself out there to make connections with new people. And I think that so many of us say, I could use some new friends, or there are people who are looking for new romance. And of course, looking for love involves dating and involves a lot of work and some successes and some failures, and really making new friends is the same thing. It's really like dating. You're out there, you try people out, you see, does this person have friend potential? Do we like to do the same things? Well, we have a whole chapter about people making themselves a little vulnerable and opening themselves up to the possibility either of new love or new friends. So there was a story by Kate Lemery, and I love this because she was a young mother, 3 kids, 5 and under, and they had just moved to a new place, and so the oldest kid was going to kindergarten, and Kate and her husband didn't know anybody in their new town, and she wasn't meeting anybody, and she tried, she signed up to be a room mother in the kindergarten class, but that didn't really cause her to meet the other mothers. It was really more that she was there with the teacher and the kids. And then she would go to the soccer games, but again, she wasn't really making a friendship with the mothers at the soccer games. And so she was telling one of her friends from her old place about that, and her friend said, you should throw a party. And Kate said, well, I can't throw a party because I don't know anybody. And her friend said, just do it anyway. So Kate managed to get the email addresses of some of the mothers from school, and then she had the email addresses from the soccer team mothers. And she had to get her courage up to do it. But finally, her husband said, you should really do it, and you should serve chicken wings. And she said, well, I'm not serving chicken wings, but I guess I'll do it. So she ended up sending out an invitation, and she said to all these ladies, bring a friend with you, because she figured they would be hesitant about coming also to her house where they knew nobody. She ended up getting something like 38 women accepting her invitation to this first party, and everybody had a great time and started to get to know each other. And she held a series of these parties, which she called Mommy Mixers, and she ended up making so many new friends. And somebody recently said to her, you're the glue who holds us all together. So she went from knowing nobody to being the social glue in her community. And I thought, what a great idea. Somebody's going to read that story in this book, and they're going to do that, and it's going to change their life.
And I love that story because it is tough. When we get into new communities, sometimes it's really tough to meet other people. And what a clever way of doing that.
Yeah, I thought it was really smart. And then there was another story from a woman who was divorced, and she had an occasional boyfriend, but he was raising his own kids, so he wasn't that available to her. And she was raising her daughter, but she was very lonely because she had lost most of her friends during the kind of turbulent years that led up to the divorce. And so she went online looking for a way to meet people. She looked up book groups. She looked up those kind of meet-up groups where you find people with similar interests and you meet up to pursue an activity. And then she ended up joining a divorce support group, which her boyfriend said, oh, my gosh, that's just going to be a bunch of people complaining. But it turned out it wasn't. It was very social. And she went to a couple of meetings of this divorce support group, and it was fun. One time they did a trivia contest. One time they went bowling. And so she made a pledge to herself. A lot of our writers make a pledge to themselves to do something. And her pledge was that she was going to participate in every activity of this divorce support group that she could afford to engage in. She was going to do that for an entire year and see what happened. Well, she made such good friends. And the funny thing is that while she was getting so actively involved with that group, all of a sudden that made her more attractive to her boyfriend. And all of a sudden he wanted to see her a lot more, and they ended up getting married. And then at the wedding, 3 of the people who stood up there with her were people she had met as a result of the divorce support group. So that was another case of doing something a little scary, making yourself vulnerable, and just putting yourself out there and seeing what would happen. And we had a number of stories like that about people finding friends or finding new love.
Or, not being afraid to, you had one there, and hopefully I don't mess this up again. Let's see, it was the one about the Today Show, number 57, an introvert on the Today Show. Roz Warren was...
oh, yeah. That was so great.
That.
I met her also at our New York City contributor event. I met her also, and that was really cool. So, yeah, she wrote about wearing a bathing suit at age 58, and the Today Show loved the fact that she had written about that in the New York Times, and they invited her to come onto the show. She said, okay, but not in a bathing suit. And then she did that whole thing sitting outside. You know how they show like the crowd outside and they'll interview you outside surrounded by members of the public. And so she did that, and she was really scared, but she did it. And yes, that was a fun story. And we have a lot of people talking about doing something they never, ever thought they could do. And it really does change their lives to do this scary thing, survive it, do it well, and realize, wow, I did that scary thing. I think I could go do another scary thing now.
Yeah, life ends up being not so scary when you start marking things off your list. And I get that. I mean, first time I went rock climbing, rappelled down a 120-foot cliff. I was scared of heights until I did that. And afterwards, it's like, you can't get me off the rock,
I did it in a gym, and I was scared even in a gym to do the rock climbing, but it was part of, my attitude, which was to just try everything at least once. And and I loved it, too. In fact, I started trying to find a gym around here where I live in Connecticut, but I couldn't find any that were close enough. But it was really fun. And that's, oh my gosh, that's another topic that we have, which is that you need to trust. So when you're doing that rock climbing, you have to trust that the equipment will hold you up, and you have to trust the people who are telling you that the equipment will really hold you up and that you can rely on your harness. And that's a big part, I think, of doing new things, is you also have to trust people and trust equipment and trust what you've been told, that it really will work.
Well, and isn't that how life is, though? We have to really trust those around us, and life really opens up in a beautiful way when that happens.
Oh, yeah. I had a major trust thing. So I think the biggest trying new things event that I had was we went on vacation to Oman, and we were going to this beach resort on the Persian Gulf, which I know sounds like the trying new thing, it sounds like taking a vacation in the Persian Gulf was the scary thing. And it was a little weird because we were looking across at Iran and there were oil tankers out in the water. But the scary thing actually was that to get to this resort, which was at the bottom of this like sharp mountain cliff, because that's how Oman is along the Persian Gulf. It's like these mountains and then they just drop like 1,000 feet down to the beach. So to get to the beach, you either had to take a speedboat from Dubai to this hotel in Oman, or you had to go down this winding 5-kilometer road, or you had to paraglide in from the top of the cliff. And so TripAdvisor.com had said that the really cool guests would arrive by paraglider. So I signed us up for that. And I signed us up for it 4 days before we were supposed to get there because I thought, well, this is going to sign us up. I'll have no time to think about it. We'll be there before we know it. Well, then our trip got canceled, like at the last second, literally at the last second. Like I was packing and our trip got canceled because there was a massive rainstorm in Dubai, which is very strange. We got rained out of a vacation in the desert. So anyway, we moved it for 6 months. So then I had 6 months to think about it, which was terrible. But anyway, the day finally came, and we get to the top of the cliff, and the guy is putting the harness on me, and they're telling me that you have to run off the cliff. So I look behind me. There's this parachute lying on the ground. It's just lying there with a million strings coming out of it. I'm thinking, how do I know that's going to work? And he said, if you don't run off the cliff, the parachute will not fill with air. So the only way you can paraglide and not die is if you run off the cliff. So that was the biggest trust thing ever because I had to believe that they knew what they were talking about and that the parachute would fill with air and I would not plummet to my death. And then they put a helmet on me after he tells me you must run off the cliff. And I'm thinking, what good is the helmet going to do? I mean, maybe to help identify the body, but other than that, I don't see how a helmet is going to help me if I'm falling off a 1,000-foot cliff and plummeting to my death, But anyway, I ran off the cliff, and obviously I didn't die. And now I feel like, wow, if I can run off a cliff in Oman and trust that a parachute will open, then I can do just about anything.
You know what? You can if you can do that, because for a lot of people, that would seem like, gosh, that's pretty daring to go, and jump off a cliff. But it must have been so much fun to arrive there that way.
It was fun. I was proud of myself. I was gripping like the ropes on the side so hard that I couldn't even open my fingers after. And I probably will never do it again unless I'm with my children. Then I'll be shamed into doing it again. But I don't feel like I have to do it again. But it was a great experience, and I felt very good about the fact that I had done it. It's so good to face your fears. I mean, I went on all the roller coasters at Universal Studios one day with our associate publisher, Diet Corona, because we both were there because I had just filmed a segment on Home and Family, which shoots at Universal. And so then we were there. We had maybe an hour, and she and I looked at each other and we said, let's take every single scary ride they have without stopping. We only have 1 hour till they close. And so we ran. And she and I both were the kind of people who didn't like scary roller coasters and always avoided them. Mm-hmm. But we did it so spontaneously, and we ran into the singles line for every ride so that we could get right to the front without waiting. And we managed to take every single ride at Universal in an hour. And then we were bragging to our husbands we had done it. It really feels good when you do things that you're afraid of.
Yeah, it's interesting when you do that. Those things that we were afraid of, all of a sudden they're not that big a deal anymore. It's like, oh, I can do that, or I've done that, and I really feel that, the power of yes, the new Chicken Soup of the Soul book really helps people look at that and go, you know what? I have the courage to do all these things. I'm not going to let my fear hold me back from enjoying life.
Yeah, and then there's phobias. So obviously, like being afraid to go on a roller coaster or something, that's kind of a normal fear. But then there are people who have phobias that are really hurting their lives. Like we have a story in the book from Kathy Bernier, and she was so afraid of water that she didn't even want to go to a party that was, being held poolside at somebody's home. So it was really interfering with her life. And she finally said, this is ridiculous. I have to deal with this phobia. And so she signed up for swim classes at the Y. And that first day, getting in that pool was terrifying. She spent the entire hour of the class clutching the side of the pool, but very, very gradually inching her way down to the deep end. 1 inch at a time, clutching the edge of the pool. And she got all the way to 5.5 feet. And she was so proud of herself. And she ended up becoming a really big swimmer. And now she swims at the Y all the time. And she sent us a picture of herself, in the pool, beaming with the 5.5 foot marker, in the pool deck in front of her. And I love that story because even when you have a phobia, somehow that moment can come along where you say, this is interfering with my life, and I'm going to take back my life. I'm going to reclaim my ability to enjoy life, and I'm going to say no to this phobia. So she was a great example, and we have a number of people who wrote stories in the book about overcoming phobias. One woman, Joyce Lombardi, was afraid of tunnels. So, when you're looking at a map, you can see a tunnel if it's underwater because there'll be blue on the map. But if it's through a mountain, you can't tell when you look at a map. And she, by accident, had to go through the Allegheny Mountain Tunnel, and she forced herself to do it. And then she said, you know what? I've reclaimed my life, and these tunnels can't control me anymore. It was a really big moment for her.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, because phobias are a whole nother level of fear. And when people have phobias, to have the courage to, go through the tunnel, to swim in the water, whatever it takes to face that fear, I mean, that's such a huge thing.
Yeah, and you know what? You can do it because it's basically a matter of exposure therapy where you just force yourself to expose yourself to it, a little bit at a time. I remember we had a story from somebody who was so afraid of sharks that she actually wet herself at her grandmother's apartment because she wouldn't walk into her grandmother's powder room because there was a National Geographic in there with a picture of a shark on it. And, everybody gets to that turning point where they say this is ridiculous, and that was the point for her. And so she basically practiced on herself cognitive behavioral therapy using exposure therapy. And she first forced herself to look at pictures of sharks. And then she forced herself to watch a documentary about sharks on television. And then she forced herself to go to the aquarium and see a shark through the glass. And it finally got to the point where she could go to the beach and go in the water and participate with her friends and not be terrified of going to a beach party. And by the end of her story, she was snorkeling.
Out there enjoying life and just kind of taking life and enjoying everything it has to offer. I absolutely love that. Well, and so, Amy, where can people learn more about this latest book, The Power of Yes?
So you go on our website. It's www.chickensoup.com. And you'll see The Power of Yes book right there on our homepage. And if you click on it, you can read all about the book, and you can also watch a book trailer where I tell 5 stories from the book. So that will give people a little more information about what's in the book. And the book is available every place that sells books. I mean, it's all over the place. We got huge orders for it, lots of attention for this book.
Oh, I know it has, and I know that people have been just raving about it because there's something in there for everybody. My goodness, Amy, thank you so much for taking the time to share the power of yes with us here today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for saying yes to Chicken Soup for the Soul, The Power of Yes. It's really an honor to be on your show. I know that you are very influential, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak to your audience.
Well, thank you, Amy. It is always such a pleasure to spend this time with you. And of course, I love talking about the latest Chicken Soup for the Soul book. I cannot wait to see what you do next. So we'll have to have you back on for the next book. Again, if you'd like to connect with Amy, you can at chickensoup.com. There's also an opportunity on that website where you can submit your own story, hopefully for the opportunity to have it included in the next Chicken Soup for the Soul book. Isn't that exciting? Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.